For a 72 and the noes of 44. It's all corrected. I call the Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be read a third time.
No.
I'm pleased to.
No, the member must read the full name of the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the West Coast Windblown Timber Conservation Lands Bill be read a third time. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand in the House as a practical conservationist and put the case as to why this bill makes good sense. I understand much about why New Zealanders value New Zealand's clean green brand, but that does not mean that we surrender our common sense. When trees are fallen and are dead, there is nothing wrong about saying that we should utilise that wood for people's jobs and economic well-being. I say quite simply that we are not such a wealthy country that we can let valuable felled timber rot. Mr. Speaker, I do want to run through just quickly and respond to a few of the reasonable points that were made between much of the vindictive directed at me in the committee stages. Firstly, there is a real contradiction from Labor members arguing in one breath that this bill should only apply for 2 years, and then the next breath argue that they're worried about a flood of timber, Indigenous timber, into the marketplace. Those two positions are not compatible. The reason the government wishes to run the bill over a period of 5 years is that is the reasonable recoverable period for the timber. Mr. Speaker, the more ridiculous demand from the member, Damien O'Connor, is that the government must guarantee in law that the jobs and the revenue, that's exactly what he said, guarantee that West Coasters get the jobs and that West Coasters get the revenue from the timber. Mr. Speaker, that is a nonsense. That's exactly the words that the member said in his press release. That is a complete nonsense. We don't do that in any other part of the country. Mr. Speaker, that would be as sensible as saying that in the billions of dollars that's being spent on the earthquake recovery in Christchurch, that we've got to guarantee that the building contracts or the jobs go to Cantabrians. They need to go to those that are best able to do the work. Mr. Speaker, members opposite said that it would be okay, rather than putting the bill through in a single day, if we set it for a select committee and a process over 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, I simply make this bet. If the government had come to the House and said that we were going to refer this bill to a select committee for 2 weeks, there would have been cries of foul and horror that this process was way too constrained, that there wouldn't be time to publicly advertise and for people to be able to come before the select committee and have their view represented. Mr. Speaker, I very openly published this bill a week ago to give members the chance to study its detail. It is only temporary legislation that will not be permanent. Mr. Speaker, I also note the amendments from Moana Maki, in which he wanted to have the maps put into the schedule of the bill. The reason the government did not support those amendments is they actually would have created more uncertainty. These were very broad maps, and there is no way in which the Director-General, who has responsibility for administering this Act, could reasonably have been able to decipher where it would have been acceptable to grant permits. It's more sensible to do so by the description of the status of the land, as has been done in the bill. Mr. Speaker, there's been all sorts of spurious claims made about the fact that I've been quite open, that as part of the recovery of the timber after this massive storm in the West Coast, it is the intention of the Department of Conservation to commission research so that we can see exactly how forests that have had some timber removed recover in comparison with those areas that have not had removal. And that is done with no secret agenda or anything other than saying in the event that that research shows that timber recovery is quite reasonable in situations involving windblown incidents of the massive scale that we've seen on the West Coast with Cyclone Eta, then I would be open-minded about a permanent change to the Conservation Act. Mr Speaker, one of the more extraordinary contributions in the committee stages was that how dare I, as Minister of Conservation, amend the Conservation Act? Well, Mr Speaker, if we're going to adopt that ridiculous approach, why bother having a parliament? Why would the Minister of Labour amend the Labour Act? The Conservation Act is not some locked-in stone holy granite that we must never ever amend or rethink. This is a government of practical conservationists, of which where we can reasonably use timber, we should take that opportunity. Mr Speaker, I do have to note the extraordinary events in this House that I've not seen in 24 years, and that is that we have two members of the Labour Party voting against their party. That just shows the level of disunity, the level of division and the lack of leadership in the Labour Party. I challenge any member of the Labour Party. Tell me any time in the last 90 years where you've had two members of your caucus vote against. Oh, well, Sue Moroney says quite a lot of times. When? No, not once. Not once, and that shows that the Labour Party, for the very reason that Shane Jones left, is in a mess. They don't know what they stand for. They're in no position to govern on their own, let alone attempt to govern this country with the other parties on the opposition benches. Mr Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that this is a sensible, pragmatic bill that does no more than enable the Director-General of Conservation to grant permits for the recovery of wind-blown timber. Eugenie Sage, when this issue first arose 4 weeks ago, challenged me and said that if we wanted to recover the timber, we needed to bring a bill to this House. That is exactly what I have done. It is the right way for the government to be open with the Parliament, to make the law clear, and I have got confidence in the Department of Conservation and the Director-General to make sure that this work is done in a sensible way that enables that valuable timber to be recovered without putting the core conservation values at risk.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thanks very much. So the Minister made it sound like it was Eugenie Sage's fault.